Okay, folks, we're going to see if this doesn't send my computer into spasms. I've never actually tried to put a video within one of my videos, but we'll see how it goes. This was a live stream, it was a 6-hour live stream. It's called an EFAP, and basically it means well, I'm not exactly sure what it means. At some point during the video, Ethan Van Sciver says it stands for every frame a pause, which just speaks to how long and how much he pauses and talks about the videos he's reviewing. But it's mostly him commenting on a video. Now, this video, I was shocked to see, features me. I was not. I almost gave up on this video because this is a 6-hour live stream video. And I got through about 2 hours of it, and I was just like, ugh, this is a beatdown. I'm about to give up. And I'm so glad I didn't, because all of a sudden I appear in the video. And I had no idea that was coming. I don't know if I appear in the video past the section I'm about to show you. I haven't watched the rest of it yet just because I haven't had time. I mean, 2 hours of the video is long enough, but yeah, let's just see. Let me just show you this portion of the video, and then I'll talk about it. So let's go here.
Says for $2, are nitpicks valid criticism? How many is too many? Yeah,
I think there's a level of, at least for me, I think that part of the editorial stuff is that. But, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, Ethan, but like at least one of the big things that I learned from music, is I'm repeating myself for a lot of people. It's if you have to go back and you're like analyzing it days after, and I'm gonna correct that, I'm gonna do this different, I'm gonna do this different. At some point, it becomes diminishing returns and it's overproduced. And
that Mike Partika guy is nitpick.
Oh yeah, like stuff like that. Like he's talked about like, okay, he was confused by the color of a truck, and I was like, okay, man, like.
It's all valid, but is it worth, like, Mike Partika goes through work and he nitpicks to the point where he makes a whole like 15-minute video based on one single page. And you know, I mean, is it valid? Yeah, maybe. Is it worth considering? Well, not usually, no. And I tell him that. I'm always like, Mike, you know, first of all, I appreciate Mike because he went through my books and found a bunch of spelling errors and then listed them in a file for me, which I sent to my letter, had it all corrected. I like, thank you. Like, that's the stuff that I'm talking about. I want that. If anybody's,
yeah, for sure.
If anybody's willing to do that, like, please do that for me.
Absolutely.
You know, but when you're like, you know what, like, I don't know if this here matches this here. It's like, okay, well, I'm just going to ignore that. Then big structural issues in a story, though, I am interested because I'm still like fresh to writing, so I'm interested in hearing it out at the very least. Mike Partika doesn't do that. He is entirely a nitpicker, which is there's something interesting about that guy. I don't know. I do watch his videos when he talks about me. It's fun.
Listen to people that want to make their product better, but
okay, hopefully that made it. So I'm going to drop that portion, and I'll have to come back and see. Hopefully you were able to at least get the sound off of that. That's really the part that I needed, was the sound. But for the rest of this, you're just going to be looking at me. Sorry. So here's what I wanted to say about that, and thank you to Ethan Van Sciver for even deigning to mention me there. And let me see if I can get myself a little bit of background to take the edge off the glasses reflection. Oh, the production values you see in this thing are just amazing, aren't they? You will never say one of my videos has been overproduced. Okay, here we are. All right, so Let's go over what they said. First of all, let's talk about what Eric July said, because and I had the chance to meet him yesterday. He was at meet and greet in North Texas, and so I drove out there, sporting the Rippaverse shirt, and got to exchange some pleasantries with him. Nice guy, and everything went fine. I didn't stick around for the rest of the festivities. That is one crowded place. It's called Farm and Feed out in Plano, and it's a bar for gamers, basically. You can go and rent a booth or a computer and be gaming to your heart's content. And they had a whole bunch of other people there. I think Nerdrotic was there, and people who I just never heard of before because I'm not in the gaming scene. So I didn't want to stick around for that. Anyway, getting back to the point, Eric July was talking about diminishing returns and how many times do you have to go over your product before you're ready to release it? Because at some point you're going to get to the point where you're trying to perfect it to the nth degree, such that it's going to be overproduced, like he said. That is true. There is a point at which you just basically got to cut ties and call it good. You know, Michael Jackson had that problem. You know, he never was satisfied with his final product because he always could hear things that he was like, maybe I could do that a little different, or maybe I could do that a little different. But eventually, you have to make the cut and put it on the record. And the same is true for comics, and I totally understand that. Because when you're going through a comic, I've done the same thing. Recently, I wrote a 12-page script for a comic, and I went through that thing, and then I read through it again, and then I, took a step away, came back, read through it again, made some changes, came back, took a step away, went through it again, and on the last pass, I was like, I think this is going to be the last pass. I don't think I'm going to be able to make it necessarily better than this. And almost immediately I found out I was wrong. I could have made it a little better because the artist came back to me with some sketch work that I thought was like, oh, yeah, I could see how what I told him to do was not actually what I wanted. And so, that was one of those cases where I'd have to have some back and forth with the artist before the finished image was something that I was willing to release. But that was on me because I didn't give the proper instructions. And so there's always going to be stuff that slips through, and you realize that, oh, okay, what I said either may not have been enough instruction, or maybe what I said was the wrong instruction, and so the product that I get back may need to be altered. So at every stage in the process of producing a comic book, you're going to want to be taking a look and saying, okay, did the artist do something that I didn't want? Did I miscommunicate to the artist such that the artist brought that back to me, and now I have to go back and say, oh, yeah, I really need actually this to happen? Those are all things that will happen during the course of making a comic. And the question becomes, when do you stop? And I think what they're saying in that video is that, well, you want to make sure you get the errors that everybody can agree on are errors out of the way, like spelling errors. I mean, why do you even bother to correct spelling errors? I mean, that's a valid question. Why would you even bother to correct a spelling error in your book? Well, because number one, everyone knows it's wrong. And number two, you want your book to look professional. You want your book to make a good impression. And when you have errors that everybody can agree on are errors in the book, then that's something you want to change so that your book comes off looking polished, comes off looking like it's been reviewed and done well, and that care has been taken with the book, that you're not just carelessly sending stuff out to the reader. I think one of the first errors that in ISOM #1 that Eric July ever admitted that was in there was that there was a typo, and it was just a plain accidental typo. I think either the word "and" got repeated twice, or you saw the words "a" and together. And okay, fine, no problem. I mean, I understand that accidents happen. Everybody understands that accidents happen, but that is something that he said he will probably correct in a later edition, and that's because everybody can agree that that is a mistake in the book. Now, when it comes to the smaller stuff, like the stuff that I bring up, and you look back on the stuff that I talk about and say, well, yeah, I could change that, but is that going to violate the law of diminishing returns? Well, maybe it will. And it depends on at what stage of the process are you in, and what is it that you're actually wanting to accomplish when you release maybe a second printing of your book. For example, let's just go to the famous the famous example that Eric brought up, which was the color of a truck. Now, basically, my argument in that particular scene is that we transition from a scene in which you can see a truck, and then in the next scene, the very next panel, actually, you see a young man getting into the back of a truck that is the same color as that truck, but it's not that guy's truck. And how do we know that? Just looking at it right then and there. If the truck is not a different color. Well, we don't. The only thing that tells us is the dialogue that comes later. But do you even want the reader to be that confused for that amount of time? I would say no. And so I would say, change the color of the truck. And now Eric can look back at this and say, well, that's diminishing returns. But what has been frustrating me for so long, and I think Ethan Van Sciver pointed this out, is that Eric's been using a different language to describe it. He's been calling that criticism invalid. It's not invalid if what you're basically saying is, yes, I could correct that, but that's diminishing returns. And for the sake of economy, for the sake of trying not to waste time or money trying to get this particular thing done, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to leave that burden on the reader to understand what it is that I mean. Then, okay, that's fine to say that, but that doesn't make the criticism invalid. You're saying this is a valid criticism, in fact, but because I don't have the time or money to deal with something that small, and which I hope the reader can understand because of the dialogue in it, then I'm just going to ignore it. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But don't call the criticism invalid because you don't want to do the effort. I mean, you may have good reason that you don't want to make the effort, but that doesn't make the criticism invalid. It's kind of like if somebody comments on your clothing and you already got yourself all dressed up, and then somebody says, that those shoes don't really match with that outfit, and you look and it's like, look, they match well enough. You're not saying that the person's criticism is invalid. You're just basically saying, I don't care. I don't care enough to make the effort to change shoes at this late point in the game. We got to go. Our time's out. I want to make the party on time, etc., etc. All of that is fine. All of that is fine. It's a difference between calling something invalid and saying, for the sake of economy, I'm not going to address that. Now, there are, of course, things that we have just plain old disagreements as to whether or not something is wrong. I could bring up some examples, but that's not really the point here. The other point that I wanted to address is what Ethan said about, don't bring me the nitpicks. What I want to know are the grand ideas about story structure and things like that, because I'm a novice writer and I'm trying to be a better writer. So if you can do something that helps me become a better writer, tell me that. Give me the large ball ideas as opposed to the small ball ideas, the nitpicks and stuff. The problem I have with that approach is that very rarely do I have advice where I can say, you know what, I think your approach is wrong, because I don't know what approach you intend. I don't know what your vision for the comic is. Like, for example, let's go back to ISOM #1 for a second. And I would not, in the having built up this whole scene into a conflict with Yaira, and now here's Alpha Core, and Avery's just been thrown into a taxi, and all of a sudden, from there, you cut back to the ranch, and then when it was about to cut back, I'm thinking, okay, now we're going to see how Avery interacts with Alpha Core. And that's exactly what doesn't happen. I'm not left with what I expected to happen, which was a building on top of everything that came before and a continuation of the momentum. What I had instead was a shrinking down of all that momentum where, Eric basically let those characters go their way so that we could get back to the more focused story of Avery and Darren and Santuan and just their dealing with one another. Now, on one hand, that's kind of genius in the sense that you've basically given us a foundation to meet these characters, Yaira and Alpha Core, without having to explore their stories in great detail, the way that Chuck Dixon might have advised that he actually put more detail into the story over. But at the same time, I look at that as a loss of momentum and a narrowing of focus that hurt the book, in my estimation. But the thing is that I can see where in Eric's vision for the book, he wanted to give that, that big foundation, but then focus on a narrow slice of it so that he could drive the story forward just concerning Avery and not get confused and muddled with the Yaira and Alpha Core threads. That's perfectly valid. I mean, I can't argue with his vision for the book, even though I didn't like the loss of momentum. To me, it reminded me of the difference between Spawn 2 and Spawn 3, where at the end of Spawn 2, you've got the Violator about to attack Spawn from behind, and then in Spawn 3, Spawn's looking around like, where'd the little guy go? Because he just vanishes, and the momentum of the book was broken at that point. So that gave the break in momentum gave me a bad taste in my mouth, but at the same time, the narrowing of scope is, in my estimation, exactly what Eric wanted to accomplish. And so how can I call that wrong? I can't disagree with what it is he actually intended to do. And that is why I don't go for the large ball stuff, because I can't tell the difference necessarily between a mistake and an artist's vision of where things will go. Now, if occasionally I will get into the large ball stuff, occasionally. Like, for example, in my commentary on Graham Nolan's 8-page preview for Ghosts of Matacumba Key, one of the things I bring up is the fact that the relationship between the two main characters, the man and the woman who are the detective agency, I forget their names at the moment, but go watch that video, and you'll see that I say, you know, these two have a very good relationship with each other, despite the fact that the agency is in trouble because they can't get work and they have money problems. Now, generally, a couple like that is under enormous stress. And when they're under enormous stress, their relationship suffers. If you look at the number one cause for divorce, you will usually find that it is money problems, that causes all of this tension in the household that, you know, eventually they just go their separate ways because they can't stand to be sniping at each other. And you can see this couple sniping somewhat. You know, the girl in there is definitely sniping at the guy. So I suggested toward the end of the video that what if this comic book detailed not only their solving the case, but also their mending their relationship, which is on the rocks. Now, that to me adds a layer to the story that is much more interesting than having a happy couple go off and solve a crime. What if you have an unhappy couple go off and solve a crime, and at the same time that they're working through the case, they're also working through their issues? Now, you know, I said that with full knowledge that that just might not be where Graham Nolan wanted to go with that at all. But I just basically laid that out there saying, hey, if you have the ability to do that, then maybe you, or if you still have, if you're early enough in the game where you want to make that kind of change, maybe you can make that kind of change. But I don't know. And that's another problem too, is that when you're talking about making large ball comments on story structure and how the book is written and how the book is structured, you're really commenting on something that can't be changed. And one of the things that now, of course, at the point that I have ISOM number 1 in hand, and I'm able to go through it and say, oh yeah, that I don't, that's confusing, that doesn't make sense, this over here. Well, it's already too late, which is why I feel like you need a good editorial team to go through the book with a fine-tooth comb, looking for all the nitpicks, so that all of these things, which are the equivalent of those spelling errors. Now, they're not spelling errors that everybody agrees on, because, as I've said in other videos, depending on one's inexperience or even experience, it'll come across to people in different ways. You might be able, as an experienced reader, to see something that an inexperienced reader would not pick up on. And because Eric's audience, and maybe even Ethan's audience, is by and large inexperienced readers who are more interested by and large in their comic book commentary and YouTube commentary, and are only now getting into the comic side of things, probably less the case in Ethan's side than it is in Eric's side, then these are not people who would necessarily be able to discern, okay, this is a problem, versus what an experienced reader would be able to do. So when it comes to the nitpicks, why do I focus on the nitpicks and why do I drive the points home in videos? Well, partly, I'll do a video on a particular page, and the reason being is that there either might be so many things on that page, or there might be a theme running through the book, or something that I've seen in other books. Like, for example, the fact that you have a lot of unnamed characters, or half-named or late-named characters in ISOM number 1. This is not an uncommon problem across comic book creators. It happened in Graham Nolan's Ghost of Matacumba Key. It happened in Rini Strachowski's Fiendish. You have characters that go unnamed that really should be named. And those are the kinds of things that I pick up on that obviously they didn't, because they know things, and what they know, and Ethan has talked about that himself, he has got to remove himself from the picture and say, okay, I'm coming to this knowing nothing. What would a person who knows nothing think of this particular book? Come into it fresh, don't know anything. How do I read through the book? And when you do that, then you're able to spot these little things that are the equivalent, even though they're not spelling errors, they're like the equivalent of spelling errors, and they do make the book look bad. They do make the book look unprocessed, like as if you were careless sending the stuff out. And while there is the excuse or the reason, I mean, I don't know what the real difference between the two is. I guess it depends on context. Of being economical and trying to focus your efforts on the most bang for the buck and satisfying the most customers for the buck. Don't you want a book that could reach out to the widest audience of people? Now, I like Eric July's approach of saying, you know, I want to, there are 90% of the people who read ISOM #1 who are going to be my long-term fans, and those are the people who I want to concentrate on pleasing. Perfectly valid argument. But for a very, very small change, if you can please the other 10%, why wouldn't you? And the question just winds up becoming, are you going to put forward the effort to do that? You can, you don't have to, but if you don't complain when the other person puts out what you decided you didn't want to do. And that's the main thing that I want to get across is the idea of, you know, first of all, the large ball versus, well, second of all, the large ball versus small ball. Why do I focus on the small ball? Because those are the things I can actually pick out as being right or wrong. And I'm not the only guy who does this kind of stuff or who can see this kind of stuff. I actually, my air conditioning guy, he's a longtime comic book reader. He's been reading comic books for as long as I have, probably. And he, you know, I showed him ISOM #1, and I showed him this scene in particular, which, you know, we've all talked about. If anybody who's been critical of ISOM #1 has talked about this. But I showed him this, and I don't know if you could see it well or not, but this is a picture of Sanjuan and Avery about to, you know, collide, and then all of a sudden they don't collide. You know, they're bouncing off of each other or what, you know. And he's looking at that and he's like, what the hell happened? You know, I see them about to hit and then they don't hit. You know, what happened? And then I showed him this other picture about, you've got parking lot stripes that go right up against a building. He was cracking up seeing this. Now, I got to ask you, when you know that that's what happened, when you know that people are looking at your comic, at some of the mistakes made in your comic, and laughing their asses off at it, and saying, what the hell? Is that really the kind of impression you want to leave behind? I mean, yeah, 90% of your readers, they're going to look at that and say, oh, I don't see anything wrong. And the other 10% who know what the hell they're looking at are going to say, the hell, man? What do you want to offer the audience out there? Do you want to offer a polished product, or do you want to offer something that is going to imply carelessness in your readers' minds? And to get and to wind up getting full videos of criticism like I've been offering. 13 videos on ISOM #1 so far. 13 plus if you count some of the ones that don't have the trade dress. Take a look for my Rippaverse playlist to see all of the Rippaverse videos that I've got out there. There's quite a number of them. But I just want to say, you know, maybe there's a time to not think of economy and time to think of, maybe I should put the best possible book out there so that everybody can say this is quality. And the only thing that they can complain about is that they personally didn't like the book. That would be the ideal state. Because, of course, there's going to be people who don't like the book no matter what, because it's just not their cup of tea. And you know that, and that's why that you're producing different kinds of books. Speaking to Eric July here, you're going to produce different kinds of books throughout your line. You've got the police procedural coming with ISOM, or not ISOM, with Alpha Core. You've got this narrow, more urban setting with ISOM. You've got the whatever Yaira is, I don't even know. And then Norfolka, who can even tell? So, but we're going to have a variety of different characters and scenes and archetypes and things like that. And maybe one of your readers is going to, and maybe someone will like one book and not another. And that's perfectly normal. It reminds me of CrossGen back in the day. They had all sorts of things connected under one big meta theme. Perfectly valid approach. And maybe you just want to make that appeal to the readers who you think are going to stick with you and just focus on pleasing them and never mind all the other critics out there. And that's fine, but don't expect, and I know you don't care about it, but don't expect people to say that your book is the greatest thing since sliced bread when it's not, and when you've chosen for it not to be, because you didn't want to put in the work, sometimes even small amounts of work, that would have made it so. And that's not rendering any criticism that we give invalid. It just means that you had other priorities. And that's fine. Choose your priorities with whatever makes your business work best. But at the same time, don't disparage the people who are telling you, this stuff is wrong. You're basically saying to them, I know it's wrong. I don't care. Most of my readers like the book despite the fact that I have stuff wrong with it. And I'm going to rock with them because they're going to rock with me. It's a valid argument. I'm not complaining about that. So long as it doesn't come back on me in such a way as to say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. No, I damn well do. I just don't know how to get it across that it matters. And maybe it doesn't in the long run. But, that's a your mileage may vary kind of thing. All right, so I'm Mike Partika. Thank you for watching. I hope this video comes out well. I enjoyed making it because, God, I rarely get to talk about, like, me, in terms of me being critiqued. But I expect I will be critiquing ISOM number 2 in exactly the same way that I critiqued ISOM number 1. Although I do expect to have some better production values on that, I hope. Speaking of which, I think I might actually be doing my first live stream in a while. Well, not in a while, like ever. I've never done a live stream. I need to probably do a couple of practice ones just to see how it goes. So I might put those up in the next couple of days. But I have an idea for a live stream that I don't know how well it's going to go over with anybody. So be on the lookout for that. Please do subscribe to the channel so that you can get notifications of what is coming down the pipe. And also like this video if you found it informative. Social media-wise, I am on Gab. I'm not on Twitter. Those bastards booted me. And I'm thinking about getting on Truth Social. Still haven't bit the bullet yet. I've seen a lot of bad reviews about the Truth Social app, which has led me to think maybe I shouldn't put it on my phone, but I may still try and use it from my desktop and just see how that goes. Other than that, find my videos on YouTube, BitChute, and Rumble, and I will talk to you later. Thank you for watching.